All right, YouTube. Hillary Clinton is dragging out the "ma-guns" argument on the campaign trail. No big surprise. I mean, the Democrats, specifically like the Feinsteins, Obamas, and Clintons, not so much like the Jim Webbs, more of the centrist Democrats, but those that are kind of out there and they really like to use the wedge issues. And they're running a general election. You know, in some states it doesn't work quite as well as others. Bernie Sanders knows that well. That's why he takes a hands-off approach. Some of them, they're like gluttons for punishment. They don't understand that the will of the population, the understanding of the population, is just not with them on guns. People understand in most parts of the country the crime wave that really happened here, as far as the epidemic of violent crime that you hear talked about every day on like Being Liberal, Salon, or some other retard page like that. That happened back in the 90s and the 80s. It no longer exists. We're at a 40-year low in most classes of crime. In some classes, we're even lower in that, or at least very near so. There is no epidemic of violent crime in the United States right now. The epidemic we are suffering under is the epidemic of states that don't understand the U.S. Constitution, really want to grind people down. We see the gun apocalypse sort of stuff in California right now where they want to introduce a bunch of new regulations, and it just doesn't work. In most parts of the country, it's now easier than before to obtain so-called assault rifles, which are really just cosmetically enhanced hunting rifles, to obtain ammunition, to obtain body armor. They've repealed restrictions on concealed and open carry in many states. Now, I don't credit that alone with the drop in violent crime in the United States, because a lot of those recensions of restriction come after the crime rate was already beginning to drop. I think part of it's economic. I think part of it's social. I think part of it's 9/11, honestly. I think after 9/11, a lot of those people that were involved with sort of the organized crime stuff, they fucking went and enlisted, or they left their life of crime out of a weird sense of patriotism. Honestly, I think that's the case. I may not necessarily think that way, but others apparently did. So you can't credit the prevalence of guns solely with the drop in violent crime and like property crime in the United States. But at the same time, when people claim that there's some sort of gun crime epidemic in the United States, it's getting worse and worse, and more people are being killed, mass shootings everywhere, everyone's at risk. That's just not true. That's an attempt to use emotion to manipulate your own fans and independent voters. Most of them understand that that's not true. Hillary Clinton is a glutton for punishment. She's invoking one. It's like when the Republicans invoked gay marriage in the past. It was a losing issue. Any sane person knew that it was a losing issue, but they kept invoking it anyway. Mitt Romney tried to do this, remember? It didn't work out so well. Oh, I think marriage is between one man and one woman. That's great during a primary when you're trying to wine and dine the red states. You know, you're trying to win the Nebraska primary or something. But how is that going to help you in New Jersey or Vermont or New York or a place like that? And too often, both parties, the Republicans, especially with gay marriage and abortion, let's face it, and the Democrats, especially with gun rights, but also with taxation, they run a swing state campaign. That is, the campaigns that they run are hyperpartisan, based on a few wedge issues, with the understanding that both parties have certain states that they intend to retain forever, and then they are fighting for half a dozen swing states. It's stupid. It never gives either party the referendum that they need. It's very short term. It's very dumb. It's not the proper way to run an actual political campaign in the general election. I don't know why they do it. I guess they expect that it'll be easier. They only care that they win. They don't care what the margin is for some reason. I'd think that makes you a loser myself. We've got a candidate finally from one of the major parties actually running a true national candidacy, which is why I believe that he'll win handily over Clinton. But the things that Clinton has actually dragged out of the mud to try to put into place to stop what gun crime still exists here don't make any sense anyway. A ban on assault rifles. What the fuck good is that going to do? Most of the gun crimes in this country occur with handguns. They don't occur with hunting rifles that have been modified in some way. By the way, an assault rifle, when people talk about it being an uber scary 60 round a second baby killer sort of rifle, no military in the world uses the kind of rifles they refer to as assault rifles. They're not automatic. They're not an automatic weapon. They're not a particularly powerful weapon either. It's just, I guess, compared with, your granddaddy's shotgun or a .22 revolver or something, maybe it's powerful. Other than that, you can forget about it. It's no different from any other civilian firearm, which is exactly what it is. It's made for civilian usage. A Winchester repeating rifle is more of a military weapon than the AR-15 because it was actually used for a military purpose long, long ago. Most people, I guess, don't quite understand this. Another thing, mandatory background checks. You already get a background check if you're going to buy a firearm. A lot of people have this weird illusion that there are all these black market channels through which people are getting illegal weapons, and that's just not the case either. Most of these weapons, they're stolen from somebody who acquired them legally, or they're acquired legally. It's, all this stuff about, straw sales, gun shows, my goodness, somebody's going to get shot. It's just, it doesn't work that way. What about mass shootings? Mass shootings are no more prevalent now than they were in the past. I hate to break it to people who want to be afraid, but they're just not. They're just not any more prevalent than they were in the past. They're at roughly the same level, at least increased by the fact that you've got a higher population now. Yeah, if the population doubles, you would expect to see twice as many school shootings. That doesn't mean people have gotten more violent. It just means that there's more crazies out there. The proper answer is give them better mental health. Increase the mental health system. Try to get people back into that system instead of constantly kicking them to the curb, and you won't have this problem 9 times out of 10. But that's something that Hillary Clinton doesn't want to do because it doesn't sound as scary to say that these people are simply not right in the head. It sounds better to say they're all a bunch of evil like white jihadist militants, like neo-Confederate flag-waving loonies with a lot of automatic weapons, none of which is actually generally true at all. So Hillary Clinton is objectively wrong on firearms. There's a reason the NRA wouldn't endorse her. The NRA involves law-abiding civilian gun owners. The fact that the NRA has millions of members doesn't mean that there are millions of crazy gun toters in the country. It means that there are a lot of people who hunt, who understand the right to self-defense, and who understand that the militia spoken of in the Second Amendment, the population at large, has nothing to do with a standing military. How do we know this? Because there was no standing military when the Second Amendment was penned. It didn't exist. Our founders explicitly warned against having a standing military. They thought it was an aversion to liberty. They thought it would be make things tyrannical, which I guess you could argue that that's the case. Again, pragmatic libertarianism on my part. I wouldn't say that completely. Necessary evil, maybe, is a better way to put it. And then I see a lot of people, often Hillary fans, not so much Bernie bros, or certainly not Republicans, and definitely not libertarians. They say, well, now that there is a standing military, we don't need the Second Amendment anymore. Well, then I guess because we've got instantaneous transfer of information, we don't need the First Amendment anymore. We've got email, so we don't need the Fourth Amendment anymore. We've got atomic weapons, so we don't need the 10th Amendment anymore. What about habeas corpus? Fuck that. Right to trial by jury? Fuck that too, because where are you going to find 12 people that are actually honest? See, there's the problem, another slippery slope. The slippery slope isn't just involving the Second Amendment. The gun rights advocates, when they talk about the slippery slope argument, they set themselves up for failure because they limit it to the Second Amendment. Why don't you talk about all the other amendments that are at risk? Why don't you talk about the right to free speech, the right to privacy, the rights of the states and the people, and so forth? Those are just as important. They're at risk just as much. You denigrate one amendment, you denigrate all of them by default, because you make it less sure in people's minds that those amendments are absolute. They're not overridden by some retard court's opinion. They're not overridden by the whim of an executive. They're not overridden by the whim of Congress or the whim of some municipal authority, some crazy mayor somewhere in some major urban settlement. That's just not the way that it works. By the way, if you're so worried about guns, oddly enough, the answer is to move out of your liberal hugbox inner city, because that's where gun crime tends to be the most prevalent. You go in the gun-friendly backwoods of the United States, and most of the time, if there's a gun crime at all, it's a single act or suicide. The FBI still amalgamates those as homicides for some reason during their reporting. That's why our crime rate seems far higher. You take that out, and that's more than 50% of all homicides are single-actor suicides. Did you even know that? For a lot of you, the answer is probably no. You don't even have to be a gun nut to understand these things. I have one firearm. I don't have an arsenal. I'm not interested in assault rifles, so-called. I'm not interested in, carrying around a bunch of paramilitary equipment, some sort of like weekend soldier, weekend warrior bullcrap, and going off and LARPing that I'm playing Call of Duty. I'm not interested in that sort of thing. And you don't have to be to understand the historical basis of the Second Amendment, because it's in black and white. It's right there. You can read the Federalist Papers. You can read the opinions of our founders. There's a reason why that's important. It's specifically important not just defend your home against a criminal. Yeah, that's there. Hunt food, okay, that's just fine. What about defending your nation in the face of a foe, including a tyrant running your own nation into the ground? That was the primary purpose for the Second Amendment. It may not be convenient to consider that the primary reason. A lot of people may have this weird delusion that a modern military bereft of fuel, operating upon its own soil, firing on its own citizens, will actually be able to overrun 100 million people. But that's still the main reason why the Second Amendment's there. It's sort of like quartering troops in your home. Why do you think they wrote that in the first place? They got tired of troops being quartered in their homes when they were under the control of the British. They were also tired of having the British tell them they couldn't have certain weapons because they got afraid because the colonists were getting too numerous and a little bit too antsy about their tea taxes and so forth. That's the reason it's there. Hillary Clinton is objectively, historically wrong on the Second Amendment. There is no debate. There is no argument. There is no if, and, or but regarding this. It's not up for debate because it's there in black and white. At least as far as the opinions of the founders go, and at least as far as crime statistics go, it is in black and white. It is objective truth. We can argue all day over some divine philosophical meaning behind self-defense, but if you're regarding the secular government of the United States, the secular Constitution of the United States, and pure mathematics as applied to actual crime here and now in the modern age, it is objective. She is objectively wrong, doesn't know what she's talking about, and as the kicker, Trump pointed this out, and kudos to him for doing that, she's guarded by people with guns, just like Obama was. Well, my goodness, I thought guns were bad. I thought guns were only for the privileged. Well, all these guards making, 40, 50K a year that stand around Hillary Clinton to take a bullet for if some lunatic goes on a rampage, they've got firearms. They shouldn't have firearms. They should have like sticks or mace or something like that. It should work just as well. Give them combat knives. I'm sure they'll be able to protect her. If she's so against guns, why does she trust all these big burly dudes with guns around her? I'd think it'd make her nervous. Oh, wait, that's different because she's paying them. Oh, I get it. So it's okay if it's the military, the cops, or someone on your payroll, that's okay. But if it's a private citizen who's not beholden to you for their entire living until you institute, quasi-socialist economic system, oh, then it's a problem. Oh, I get it. Certainly trustworthy, no manipulation there. See, she's objectively wrong. There is no crime epidemic. There's no gun crime epidemic. The meaning of the Second Amendment is ironclad. It's not really up for debate. The Supreme Court, by the way, already weighed in on it, and it wasn't a hyper-conservative Supreme Court doing that under McDonald versus Chicago. It was a pretty balanced Supreme Court. That's about all. Peace out.